Greetings, Seekers, and welcome back to DungeonFog. In this episode, we are going to be looking at perhaps the most powerful, if not certainly the most versatile tool in the entire arsenal of tools within DungeonFog, and that is the selection tool. Now, you might be wondering why I haven't started with the selection tool and then just sort of worked my way down the list from tools from top to bottom on the right. And that's because the selection tool is actually a series of smaller tools within one tool itself. So in order to really understand how powerful and versatile the selection tool really is, I had to go into the basic utilization of every other tool up until this point. So when we start getting into the selection tool and all the things that you can start doing with it, you'll have at least a base understanding of how the tool that we're working in operates in conjunction with the selection tool. So right at the top is the arrow icon, which indicates the selection tool. And highlighting right at the very top is the entrance level, which is the name that we gave this level. We can edit that here. We can also edit that under the Levels and Layers tool if we so choose. Each tool broken down within the selection tool itself is pretty straightforward, starting with the stage. The stage itself is the physical map. So any designs, any textures that come preloaded into the map that you choose when you're first creating your map before you even jump into the editor, that's what you see here. So all of the designs and brushstrokes that we see on the stage right now, that is the stage that this is referring to. So by default, it is on. If we turn that off, if there were any other additional features or textures that would be part of this map, they'd be hidden. But since this is all preloaded into the map as this map was created when I first brought it into the editor, none of that really disappears, but you still have the option to show the stage or not if you so desire. You can also darken the stage. If we wanted to change our base stage level, we can do so under the floor section. And this works the exact same way that it would as if we were choosing a texture for a shape, a brush, drawing the room. It's all done the same basic way with the same levels of editing, whether by choosing its color, by manually selecting what kind of background we want, changing the rotation, scaling, and then getting into the colorization tool. Now, perhaps some of the stuff that we've been showing on the stage and floor level might not be very easily visible. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to then jump up to a new level where we can start showing off some of these features in a little bit more detail. So 1 second, and we'll bring you up to the next level. All right, so I have brought us up to what I've just called the test level. And this is going to show off more of these features in better detail. So notice how we can show the stage or hide the stage. So what's happening here is when we deselect the stage, it's actually going to show any levels that are underneath it as well. Not only just hiding the stage entirely, but also revealing any level that is underneath it. If we go to darken stage, you can see that when we have the stage hidden, it defaults as a darkened overlay. We can then remove that as well. Now we are still on the test level, as you can see over here, but it is hidden and it is lightened. So we can see perfectly clear, as if we were on that same level, what's underneath us. The grid aids us when we are trying to create rooms or place down assets, brushstrokes, things like that. For anybody who's ever been a GM before, or even a player, you understand that pretty much every map that you play on will be operating on a grid of some kind. This is just a visual representation of generally a 5-foot square. We'll just dial it in a little bit closer here so you can see exactly these different grid shapes in more detail. Right, so pretty hard to see right now, but where my cursor is, you can see that there's a pair of dots right there. That is because the style of grid that we have is dots. If we wanted to hide the grid entirely, we could just click that button. Now the grid is gone, allowing us to place things a lot more freely and less structured on our map. We can change using this drop-down menu to any type of other grid that we desire. Maybe we want to go dotted rectangles. We can see that. We wanted to invert it. All that does is that takes whatever style we have and just flips it. And when we have something inverted, we can start playing with its opacity, making it more visible, less visible. We can change the size. Now that's actually going to change the physical size of the grid square. So right now it's set to 100, which is basically your default setting. If we set that to 200, suddenly our grid spaces on a square by square basis are much larger. Distance metrics. Now, you're going to see a lot of fancy words like Euclidean and Manhattan and Pathfinder 3.5e, 5e. You're going to see a whole bunch of different things. All this distant metrics really is affecting how your map is being read when you're placing down a room. However, we can change that. So things like Manhattan are needlessly complicated, and I really don't want to get into those different types of grid representation, but I honestly wouldn't get yourself too hung up on these. All it is to say is that it is just a different representation numerically of how your grid space is going to be read when you start putting things like walls down. Again, the real world units is set on by default. We can also turn that off, but if we did, we can then manually adjust what each square equals. And again, it will default to 5 foot because generally tabletop RPGs operate under the pretense that 1 square equals 5 foot of distance traveled. The blueprint is actually a tool worthy of its own video just because of how complex the blueprint actually is. Suffice to say that the blueprint is a tool that you can use to import JPEGs into DungeonFog that you can then line up and align with the existing grid space that you have within the editor and try to match that up to any existing grid spaces on the JPEG itself and try to recreate maps that you find online within the DungeonFog editor using DungeonFog assets. We'll get into that in a later video because, as I said, it is a little complex and it would be too much to try to go over it in this video at this time. Color grading is a feature that allows you to augment the existing color of DungeonFog's current stage. Much like we were doing with colorization and the color tool, if you refer back to the brush and color tool video that I did earlier, it's essentially that. When we have this enabled, we can choose from a drop-down menu a list of different types of colors or effects that we can overlay and blend in with the existing texture that we're using on our map. So say we wanted summer action, let's say, for example. Well, now that's going to show exactly what that looks like. We can then alter its blending, making it very obvious that it's being color blended, or a little less obvious. Contrasting, changing effectively how much of that color is being added in, or if we want to just take it all out and grayscale it. And then brightness, basically affecting how much of the white color is being added in. And we'll reset our color settings to get us back to where we were. Actions really only have one action really that you can do within this tool, and that is to clear the stage. And we'll jump back down to the entrance level so you can see exactly what happens. So if you remember back from the path tool video that we did earlier, you'll remember that we drew essentially a walkway leading from the front of the tavern down just a little bit through this passageway here. And we can see that the clear stage action is now available. So what the clear stage action does is it takes anything that you've added that is outside of a room, brush strokes, paths, assets, anything like that, it will take it and basically get rid of it, like so. All that's gone. All we have now is the default stage that we loaded into when we first made our map before we got into the editor. A quick Control-Z undoes what we did and brings the path back in. So that's going to do it for this particular section of the selection tool. As I mentioned earlier at the start of this video, this is a very, very robust and powerful tool with a lot of different features and a lot of different utilizations depending on which particular tool you are also working in at the same time. So what we're going to do from here on out for the next few videos is we're going to be looking at more advanced editing options that you can do while utilizing the selection tool. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate all the support that you give the channel each and every day. If you're not subbed to the channel already, you can hit the sub button down below. I'd greatly appreciate that. You can also follow me over on twitch.tv/EsquireVT, where I go live at least once a week and I upload the VODs into little snippet videos as well for your viewing pleasure. You can also hit the bell icon to get notified when new content gets posted. I'm going to be uploading this one as soon as I can, and I will see you guys all in the next video.